Marketing and Entrepreneurship, a podcast by Into the Minds, marketing agency in Paris and Brussels. What are the future trends in online advertising? Will TikTok and Instagram disrupt the advertising landscape? In this episode, Pierre-Nicolas Schwab, founder of Into the Minds, welcomes Paul Lee, Global Head of Research for Technology, Media and Telecommunications at Deloitte, to answer those questions.
For this episode, I'm welcoming Paul Lee. He's the Global Head of Research for Media, Telecom and Technology at Deloitte, UK. Paul, good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
It's a pleasure to be on the podcast, and apologies for having to oblige you to speak in English.
No problem. So we are very delighted to have you on board. Paul, you gave a very interesting presentation last week at the National Conference for Marketing here in Belgium. Your presentation was on the future of advertising, and well, you presented especially the trends in media consumption, showing that the consumption of television, for instance, is decreasing in the UK. Yet what we know from recent statistics from the European Broadcasting Union is that consumption of TV is actually pretty stable across Europe. Could you elaborate a little bit on what's going on in terms of media consumption, TV, radio, and internet globally?
Yes. What's happening in many markets is the total number of hours watched of TV and the average number of hours watched per day are quite stable. So in many markets, there is a steady decline, but it's not an implosion. The averages, of course, though, only tell part of the story. What is very interesting is the variation by age group. And when you look at the cut of the data by younger age groups, so they may be the under 34-year-olds, then you see really significant declines over a 5-year period. And even in some cases, you see double-digit declines over a 1-year period in some markets. Now, the reason why I think that matters for television is because television is very strong at brand building. It's powerful for any large entity that is looking to get across a message to the majority of a population. And television is one of the only media that can do that. Now, if it's the case that in every week you can get to 90% of the population through TV commercials, that's fantastic. You can launch a new product. You can change a perception. You can launch a new logo. But if you can only get through to 80% or even 70% readily, then it becomes a lot more challenging. So the specific issue, I think, for television is around the cost of national reach, the cost of reaching the 80% of the population or the 90% of the population. And if you have a brand that's focused on younger people, and particularly like the under 20s, then you have a real challenge there.
That trend, that decrease in consumption that you are reporting, is that something that we also observe on other kinds of media, like radio, for instance?
Radio, I think, has a different trajectory. So one of the things about radio, it is very stable across multiple age groups. And when we've looked at trends in the radio market, what we're seeing in many markets is there is a decline in minutes for radio per day amongst younger listeners, but it's nowhere as marked as it is for TV. The thing about radio is that it's long had alternatives. There's long been MP3 players. In recent years, there's long been streaming. And a radio show is a great way to start off the morning because it's a combination of music with banter, with conversation, with weather, with news. It's a great background to, let's say, the commute into work or having breakfast. And it's not just music, it's the blend of that. And that's why radio is powerful. The challenge for television, I think, is subscription video on demand is often delivered without any advertising. And so people are still watching the television set, but they're watching more and more television that doesn't have advertising. I think this is a short-term trend. I think on demand will start having a lot more advertising. But in 2019, 2020, this is a challenge for the television market.
In global, when I look at some of the statistics that you showed in other statistics, for instance, a very interesting forecast that was published by Zenith Optimedia, they are showing that all in all, the consumption of media on average is increasing. So you have that share of TV that is pretty stable across all age groups. But as you said, well, the younger generation is consuming television less and less. You have that radio, which is very stable. And then you have the internet. So where is all that media consumption going to? If it's increasing in total, are we like watching more TV online? Are we watching other types of media? Are there any new types of media emerging out there?
I think when we look at these studies on how much media we consume per day, one of the challenges around those studies is that at present, what they measure is aggregate consumption across all formats. And so they will, for example, if you listen to music while you're watching a video and you've also got your browser on, then every second is counted 3 times. So when you look at the net amount of time spent consuming media, and there may be multiple streams of media which exist at the same time, it's not that great. But because we have smartphones with better and better screens, because we have services like Instagram, which deliver different forms of video there, and you've got services like TikTok and you've got instant messaging apps. So the opportunity to consume media is greater during the day. So when you're looking to just pass time, or you're on your commute, or you're just bored, then you can add to your total tally of media consumption per day. Now, what I think is really fascinating is a smartphone is a screen and a TV is a screen, but a smartphone is a screen with a lot of additional functionality. A smartphone is a screen which is linked to an operating system which may have credit card information already included within there. And what is very alluring, I think, to marketing managers and to sales directors is you have an ad format now which allows you to go from seeing to buying in just a few swipes. And that is a capability that television will struggle to match, partly because televisions don't have that capability, and partly because the people creating the TV programs do not have that mentality. Their view is still, we create a 22-minute program and nobody should interrupt it. It should never be tainted by over commercialization. So there is a technical challenge and also a cultural challenge as well.
I think that's very interesting, but don't you think that TV and the new form of advertising have different goals? Like, I mean, TV, because of its global reach, because of people like being in front of the TV set and not able to do anything else, TV helps brands build awareness, while smartphones and other form of advertising, of online advertising, help brands sell more. So I think they're like two sides of the same two sides of the same coin, but well, those media have different goals, in my opinion. What do you think?
I think that all these formats are complementary. And I do think that television has a very strong ability to build brands. And we see time and time again, for example, brands that start and grow and thrive just through word of mouth or through web-based advertising. You reach a point at which you cannot progress any further, where to be able to fully tap into the national market across all ages, you have to do television advertising. The challenge for the industry at the moment is you have chief marketing officers with very aggressive targets, which are targets not necessarily around marketing, but also are muddled together with sales targets. And the easy option to go for is let's drive unit sales. Let's focus on whatever we can move into those online baskets. And there is more of a focus on the short term, on the next quarter, on making those numbers, as opposed to going for the long-term objectives. So my view is long term, there is nothing that really competes with television in terms of the audiovisual experience, including advertising and also the receptiveness to the advertising message. But the short term allure of going from seeing to buying is really hypnotic, and we cannot ignore that.
I very much agree with your view that those two forms of media and obviously the advertising which is resulting out of it are kind of complementary. I remember that story of marketing managers saying that sales were driven by Google, by online media, cutting off all his investment in traditional TV and non-traditional media. And then suddenly after a few weeks, sales were going down because that brand awareness that was built through TV and through radio wasn't there anymore. So there is really a danger to kind of put all your eggs in the same basket.
Yes, I think there's always that risk there. And I think there'll be CMOs who succumb to it every single year. And there will be companies that change tack every single year because they have got their mix wrong.
What are the new forms of advertising which are emerging? You went through that fascinating example of Instagram during the conference here in Brussels. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
So the Instagram format is a great format for younger people. And there are people who spend a lot of time on it. It's a format which is, I would say, pretty native to video. So people are very accustomed to watching video on there. They're accustomed to watching more informal content. And so what you may do is you may get an influencer who is, for example, showing a clothing range or a type of makeup and going, this is something that I really love. This is not about advertising. It's just something I personally, passionately believe in. And they may also offer the ability to buy they're wearing, be it an item of clothing or a makeup item. And one additional capability that smartphones have is augmented reality, which in an everyday basis is filters. So we're used to the idea of filters where you may attach like a different set of hair on, or you may develop cat's whiskers, or you may swap faces with somebody else. And that same technology, which relies on understanding the contours of the face and mapping and remapping what that image looks like, is something you can use to try on a shade of lipstick or try on a type of skin coloring. So all those things are possible to do. And that's an area where television cannot compete. Now, I think where you'll always have a powerful combination is people may, lazily watch a advert for cosmetics on TV and drives them to pick up their smartphones, drives them to try out that brand. But it's also the case that people going through their Instagram feeds for 30 minutes, for an hour, will see these ads and try these products out. And so that will disintermediate the television stream as a result.
You mentioned so people starting an Instagram channel, they do that by passion, and the tone they are using is somewhat different from what advertisers can use on traditional media. But the example you showed last week of Kylie Jenner, she has 100 million followers. So I guess the tone she's using, the tools she's using, the methods and the processes she's following to communicate or to speak to her followers are quite similar to what you could find in the traditional advertising industry.
A good communicator, I think, works well across every screen, works well in person and on a screen as well. And the whole Jenner family is very, very capable at that. And social media is just one way in which that they can monetize. And it's always the case that somebody who appears very approachable, very relatable, will also be very convincing and very strong commercially.
Do we have any idea of money-wise how successful that way to communicate and that way to advertise is?
I think that form of advertising, so where you're using things like augmented reality, as of 2019, is still experimental. So one other example of this would be, say, a clothing company allowing you to try on a shirt. So I think for makeup, we're there, or starting to get there. With clothing, it's still to be proven. But the main focus for smartphone development is around the camera, both front and back. And so the ability to create ad formats like this are going to get stronger and stronger over the years. And that's something which the traditional TV industries needs to be aware of. It's not something which perhaps they can harness directly, but it's something which is a factor when it comes to their clients as to what the correct blend of formats that they're going to use are.
Yet I am aware of other initiatives, other innovations that have tried to kind of synchronize the TV with the smartphone. For instance, there is a Belgian startup called Spot, which is actually doing pretty well, selling that application where you have the ability to see on your smartphone the objects that are on your TV set and then buy them. Is that an innovation that you have seen in other parts of the world, and how similar is it to the other innovations that you talked about?
I think it can work. I think the seeing, trying, and buying works best when everything is on the same screen. So when you have somebody who is used to consuming video content on a smartphone, that is the optimal scenario for this kind of shoppable video. If you have to go from looking at a big screen on your wall to looking at the small screen in your hand, you lose people in that transition. And every time somebody has to look up and down, you lose them. Every time somebody has to pause what they're watching or lose what they're watching, then you're going to be losing some of your addressable customer base. So the ideal is people who are watching on a sole screen, be it a smartphone, a laptop, or a tablet, and where the trying and the buying is all part of an overall seamless experience. So there have been for many years attempts to try and sync, and the challenge will always be, if you're looking at two screens, to follow the same thread of content. That is very hard. If what you're doing is watching the TV and you're commenting on it to your friends on social media, that's a different thing because they can be out of sync. But if it is watching big screen, buying little screen, that is a lot harder to get right. So it's going to be younger people for whom this is a more powerful option. It won't be those who watch 5 to 6 hours of TV on a big TV set.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. Yet there was that innovation which was created by Samsung, the Samsung Smart TV, that kind of tried to make the interactivity of your smartphone converge with traditional TV. And as far as I know, it didn't really pick up. At least here in Belgium or in France, TV sets were definitely sold, but people didn't use all the capabilities of those smart TV sets at their full potential. So is there a future for traditional TV set, or do you think in the end we will just end up with a smartphone in our hand and we will just stop watching traditional TV?
Yeah, I would definitely say there's a very strong future for the traditional TV set. And I can see at least 10 more years of quite vibrant innovation to come. So the television sets are becoming smarter. So the processors that go into TV sets are often 2-year-old processors from smartphones. And also you're getting that kind of processing capability going into some of these streaming devices that attach to a TV set. So that makes the user interface a lot slicker as a result. And also, we've got innovations with HDR, so high dynamic range coming through. So by 2029, perhaps, there will be television sets on the market where the color range is so vivid that it's as if you were watching a window and looking out of a window, and there will be almost no difference between what the TV's showing and what your eyes would be seeing if they're looking out of a window. So that's one great thing to look forward to. And it's always been the case that the better the quality of the television image, the more people watch, the more impactful it is, the more persuasive it is. So the better that television sets become, the bigger that they become, the better the sound that comes out of it, the better the color range, then the more powerful the underlying program is, including a TV ad. So I don't see the television set disappearing at all. But at the same time, there are important shifts happening with TV consumption patterns by age group, and we can't overlook them. And it's always very easy to go, but if we average across the entire population, nothing's really shifting, because advertisers care about different age groups, and they really care about younger age groups, whether you agree that this is the right approach or not. That's what advertisers really care about.
So television is getting, or TV sets are getting smarter. They are probably getting bigger. The quality is getting better. But will advertising also get smarter? Will targeted advertising in particular get smarter in the near future?
I'm in two minds about targeting and television, because the entities which normally advertise on TV are big brands. They're looking to get a brand message across. You don't necessarily know who your core market is. And one great thing about television and the way in which it's traded is you get wastage. And that can be really valuable. So it can be the wastage that's more valuable than your target market. So you may think that a product is going to do really well amongst younger people, but actually it does really well amongst 50-year-olds plus. And that may be a package holiday format, or it might be a new type of food brand. And there is always going to be a degree of risk and chance and luck with any product that comes out. There's a whole variety of products which have succeeded, but partly through accident, because it's been a different target group that's really taken up that product. And that's the value of television. So will targeted TV ads really work? So part of this relies on having really good data sets, which is hard to do, and having a almost telepathic knowledge of what the target person doesn't yet know about themselves. But the easier option is just to go, let's do 8% of the population, and some of that mud is going to stick.
Yeah. You mentioned the data set, and obviously the quality of the data set is very important. You can't do targeted advertising if you have bad data. You're aware of that e-privacy regulation that has been in discussion for years now, but that will eventually come. How do you expect it will impact the ability of media houses or advertisers to get access to that quality data and to enrich their data set to make people know of new brands, of new products?
There are multiple different perceptions of privacy. The people who come to conferences will often be people who are relatively wealthy. They will tend to be people who are more aware of how data is collected, how it is bundled together, how it's uploaded into the cloud, and how it is reassembled, how it's shared. I would say the majority of people do not understand that. And I'd say for the majority of people, it's too hard to understand. So the views on privacy vary a lot in the wider population, so across an entire country. So that's one thing. The second thing is we are collecting more and more connected devices. So every year in an average household, the number of devices goes up, and each of those devices will be collecting more data. One of the trends coming through the next few years in Europe will probably be television sets, which are sold at a low gross margin. So you get a larger TV set for your money, and they monetize partly through advertising information over their lifetime, which may be 7 or 8 years. So the television set, which was done, generated no data, may be something which may share people's viewing information, may share data on who's watching, may share data on what apps people download, which app stores or sort of TV content stores that they go to, etc., etc. So I would expect this time, in a year's time, we will be sharing more data than ever before, but less than the year after. And that will go on for at least the next few years, unless there is a seismic change in regulation. But it would need to be a seismic change in regulation. And a third reality is that, so in a perfect world, we'll be able to watch lots of content, all the content we want without advertising. The reality is we want to watch as much content as possible, and in some cases, a trade-off is advertising, or the sharing of advertising information. And if you look at, say, sports, football is expensive, is going behind paywalls, and often is presented along with advertising. And the benefit of that is it maximizes revenues and it enables even more expensive players to be bought. It increases the spectacle. And I think in 5 years' time, the majority of video on demand or streaming services that you can access on a TV set will all come with some degree of advertising. And some services may have like a bar on them, which will give you different degrees of advertising time, information shared, and the quid pro quo will be the amount that you pay per month.
Last question, Paul. Do you think Netflix will eventually release a lower price subscription with advertising in it?
I can't comment on specific brands, but what we are seeing is more and more services launching with an ad-funded tier. And that tier may be free or it may be reduced. And I would expect by 2025, there will be very few services which have no ad-funded tier available. And as I mentioned, the ad funding may reduce the cost or it may enable the cost to go down to zero. It will depend on the ad load that you accept. And that is a trade-off that will always be there. And for TV ads, very few people would admit to enjoying TV ads, but a lot of people talk about the ads that they see. And that's one of the many contradictions of the human being.
Thank you so much, Paul, for sharing all those insights with us. And we hope to welcome you again in the following episode of this podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Au revoir.
Bye-bye.
If you liked this episode of Marketing and Entrepreneurship, don't forget to subscribe. See you soon.